All right, now we're going to start on chapter 9, which is a continuation on the skeletal system, but this focuses on the joints, the junctions between bones and how those are held together and what happens at those. So we're going to list the types of joints, and I will start my description of synovial joints, which when we look at like this gymnast here, we're seeing lots of movement at her synovial joints. So what is a joint? A joint is an articulation or a place where two bones comes together. They have varying degrees of movement and they're named according to the bony parts or where the bones come together. Their general functions is that a joint is going to hold the structures together, and so it forms a structure in some cases. They permit voluntary motion, and they, in some ways, determine the type of motion that's present. They also permit growth and shape changes. And so we're going to just introduce joints right now. We're going to talk about two different ways of classifying joints. We can classify joints according to their movement. Synarthrotic joints are joints where the bones are basically locked in position and there's almost no movement, so it like forms a structure. Amphiarthrotic joints have a small amount of movement. They can move maybe amphi means partial, and so it means partial movement. And diarthrosis are joints that are freely movable. Okay, and so I'll talk about those more about when I introduce joints by their structure, the types of tissues involved. In joints, we have joints that are held together by bands of fibrous connective tissue. These are fibrous joints. We have other joints that are held together by cartilage, and so the cartilaginous joints. And then we have joints with complex structure. These are the synovial joints, and they are the freely movable joints. Okay, so the fibrous joints. We have quite a number of these. Fibrous joints are those joints in which the bones are connected by fibrous connective tissue. There is no joint cavity, and usually there's little or no motion, but they do permit shape changes and growth and things like that. One of the most common types of fibrous joints are sutures. These are the fibrous connective tissue short ligaments that hold the skull bones next to one another. And these bones are kind of, it's not just that they're holding these flat ends next to each other. The bones interdigitate, which means they have finger-like projections that kind of interlock. And so then they're held together by fibrous connective tissue. At the time of birth, these joints are large, and they form these soft spots in the skull. They're the fontanelles. And so they permit the shape change of the skull during birth. But after birth, these joints are still there. And even after the soft spots are gone, these joints still permit growth. And so this is where growth of your frontal bones and your parietal bones and those bones occurs, is at the site of the joint, at the edge of the bone. After a certain time period, though, these will be completely replaced by bone. And then they're the synostosis. And so by the time you're 30 or so, these are going to be completely replaced. Okay, another type of fibrous joints are the syndesmosis. Again, just fibrous connective tissue, relatively little movement, but definitely some movement. And so like the radius and ulna, the radius rotates around the ulna, but they are held together by these interosseous membranes. And this is, or a ligament, interosseous ligament. And so these hold the bones together. And so particularly when you have two bones, like in the lower arm or the lower leg, the tibia and the fibula, these are held together by syndesmosis. Clearly movement, but not a lot. Another type of fibrous joints are the joint that connects the teeth into the jaw. These are very short ligaments. They're gomphases or gomphasis for one of them, or probably better known as periodontal ligaments. They hold the tooth into the socket and permit the tooth to grow and grow independently of the socket. And so they hold it in there. And probably, you kind of, I always thought of teeth as being like rooted in the jaw, like they were like fused, but they're not. They're held in by this ligament, and that's why teeth can be knocked loose. And so they can be knocked loose if you get a good impact into the jaw or upper jaw. You can have your teeth knocked loose, and the ligament will actually tighten up over time. Okay, the next class of joints are the cartilaginous joints. And here's where the joints are held together by bands of cartilage, which contains some collagen in it, but it's also cartilage pad there. Probably the best known of these are the synchondroses, which occur in the ends of long bones that are growing. So it's the joint between the diaphysis and the epiphysis in growing long bones. So these are the epiphyseal plates or growth plates of growing bones. Eventually, this will be replaced and there'll just be a line there, but they're really important. We also have large bands of cartilage holding our ribs to our sternum, and so these are all synchondroses. The next type of cartilaginous joints are actually kind of stronger. They contain fibrous cartilage or fibrocartilage, and these are the symphysis joints, like the pubic symphysis and the intervertebral disc. They provide a cushioning structure, but a very, very strong structure. Allow for some movement, but not a lot. Okay. Then the most common joints, the joints we commonly think of when we think of joints, are the synovial joints. They're capable of moving, they're fully movable, so they're the diarthrotic joints. And they're complex. They contain structures on the end of either bone. They will have articular cartilage that provides a smooth surface for articulation. They will have a joint capsule, which is made up of fibrous connective tissue that completely surrounds the joint and makes a cavity in there. And then the synovial membrane, which is a connective tissue membrane that lines the inside of the joint capsule and secretes a lubricating fluid. Your knee, elbow, ankle joints, the joints between your fingers, these are all synovial joints. And these are the joints we think of. They're the joints that are can when we grow old, they suffer from arthritis. These are the most common joints. All freely movable joints are synovial joints. Okay, so joints hold bones together wherever they meet. They allow bones to be held in position. They permit growth, allow shape changes, and allow movement. We classify joints by their structure or by the amount of movement. There are fibrous joints like sutures, gomphoses, and syndesmoses. There are cartilage joints like synchondroses and symphysis joints. And then there's synovial joints. Synovial joints are what we normally think of. They all contain at minimum articular cartilage, a fibrous capsule around a joint cavity, and a synovial membrane. They may have additional structures. Okay,